So in this video, we're going to build up the profile card component. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract all these images and I'm going to export them into our workspace, which I'm going to commit to GitHub so that when you clone the repository, then you're going to have access to all these icons. And we're going to talk about the repository next. So in my GitHub profile, which is the link you're going to get in the description, it is going to link you to this repository, which I've called HTML CSS YT. And inside here, you're going to get all the projects that we are going to build out. So if we are going to be talking about images and icons, you can just go ahead and clone the repository. And you know what? By the time you're seeing this video, then the repository is going to be filled up. And you can just go ahead and clone it. And you will get access to all these images and every essential item in the project. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code. And inside Visual Studio Code, I'm going to create a new folder. And this new folder is going to be called Profile Card Component. And you know what? I'm just going to call this Project 1. Call this Project -1 Profile Card Component. Right, so that we have a bit of structure to it. And then inside this folder, I'm going to get this image and all these images and I'm going to place them inside here. So just give me a moment. Okay, so now I have all my images inside this folder. And now what I'm going to do is inside right here, I'm going to create an index.html file. So index.html, which is different from this. Remember, these three files are the ones that we were working with when I was showcasing everything. Now we are beginning to build out our project. So I need to have another index.html file inside here. And then I'm also going to have an index.css because we are going to need to style out everything. So inside the index.html, remember using emmet, I can just say exclamation and enter. And then I'm going to change this document title to profile card component. And then I'm going to change this into project 1 like so. And then inside the body, let's take a look at this structure now. So we have the body being this big container. And then we have the actual profile card inside the body, which is now this. So what I'm going to do is inside the body, I'm going to create a class of container, which is going to be this. And then inside this class of container, I'm going to be rendering articles. So the first article is going to be the image as well as this text on the right, sorry. And then the second article is going to be this paragraph. And then the third article is going to be this heading right here called socials with this unordered list of items, which is going to be the social media images. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside here, I'm going to create a div using emmet. So I'm just going to say dot container, which is going to create a div with a class of container. And then inside here, I'm going to have my article. And this first article is going to have an image. The source for this image is going to be my profile. So I'm just going to say ./profile.png. And for the alt attribute, remember the alt attribute is just in case the image fails to load. Then I'm just going to say this is, let me just say this is my profile. This is, how do you say this in English? Sankara's profile. And then below this, how I'm going to structure this is that I'm going to place this into an H2 and then this into a tag called small. So because I want these two to behave as if they are one item, and then this one to behave as if it's another item within the same article, because I want to show you a bit of styling that we're going to do, then what I'm going to do is inside this article, I'm going to create another div. And this one is going to be an H2 that says my name. And then below this, we're going to have a small tag. And small just means return the text in small font. This is going to say front end web developer. And yes, front end has a hyphen in between. So once we have that, then I should mention that it is possible for a div to appear within an article. And it is also possible for an article to appear within a div because they are mutually exclusive. So once we have that, then I'm going to go ahead right inside the div with a class of container. So still within this div, and below this article, I'm going to create another article. And this is going to be a paragraph that says this. So I'm just going to copy this text here. Where is it? Copy this text and paste it in, and you can go ahead and you can pause the video, or you can add your own description. Okay, and remember, I'm toggling my sidebar using Control and B. Okay, so I keep on repeating some of these things just so that you can get the hang of it, or you can get the hang of how to use Visual Studio Code. And then below the article, we're going to have another article, and this is going to have an H3 that says socials, and then below this we're going to have an unordered list, and this unordered list is going to have list items, and it's going to have how many? 6 of them. So list items times 6, which is going to create 6 list items. And then I want to introduce something else called anchor tags, and anchor tags are what I use to link to external style sheets or to other pages within your website. So I want all of this to have anchor tags like so, and I'm just going to say tab or enter, and you can see that it creates an unordered list with list items, and each of these list items has an anchor tag with an href right inside here. And you know what, just to simplify this, let me remove all of this and let me do it manually. So I'm going to say create an unordered list like so, and then create a list item, and I want this list item to have an anchor tag which is an href, and the href now points to where you want the link to go when it is clicked. So for example, the first icon is going to be the Facebook icon. So I'm going to say when I click on this link, then I want it to go to https facebook.com/your profile. I don't have a Facebook profile, so this doesn't really work all that well. And then inside here, so inside the anchor tag, I want to place my image. So I'm going to say place my image inside here. The source for this is going to be ./facebook.svg, and then for the art, I'm going to say Facebook like so, and then it's a self-closing tag, so remember to add this as well. And the reason why I've chosen to use SVG images here for the social icons is because SVG images do not pixelate, so they don't lose quality when you increase or reduce their size. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to right click and open with Live Server. And this is what we should have on the screen. So we have this. Our icons are white, that's why it's not really visible right here. Okay, but just to show you how this works, is if I click on this icon, then it's going to go into Facebook, as you can see right here, right? Now, something else that you should know is that if you want this link to open on a new tab, then you can add an attribute here called target, and the target is going to go into _blank, which means open it up on a new page. But remember that when you add _blank, then it introduces a security issue where an attacker can use what is called cross-site scripting to get access into your website. So in order to prevent that, then you add something else here, a rel attribute here, and you set it to no referrer like so, to remove the security issue. So this is something to take note of as well. So now when I click on this link, it is always going to open on a new tab. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm just going to copy this down a few more times, so 5 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to change each of this. So this is no longer Facebook, this is now going to say Instagram, okay, because the image source is also instagram.svg. And then I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to set this to Twitter. And by the way, I've just remembered that I've not mentioned, if you want to select multiple text, for example, I want to select the text of Facebook here for here, here, and here, then I can just select the Facebook text and say Control D, which is going to select this as many times as I want. So if I want to select every text that says Facebook, but since I only want to select these 3, then I just say Control D 1 and 2, which is going to select these 2. And then I can change this into, what is the next one? This is Twitch, YouTube, and Gumroad. So Twitch, and then the next one is going to say YouTube, and then this final one is going to say Gumroad. And then now when I save this, then all these icons are going to appear. As you can see, we have bulleted lists right there. Okay, and if I open this one, you can see that it goes into Gumroad. Okay, fantastic. Now, if you want to link this to your profile, then you have to place in the full link. So for example, if I want this Gumroad link to go into my profile, then I'm going to link it into tsbsankara.gumroad.com. And now when I save this and I try to open this Gumroad link, which you can't really see because the icons are white, then it's going to go into my Gumroad profile. So that's how you do that. Now let's go ahead into our index.css and let's begin styling this out. And remember that there is some default margin and padding on elements in HTML. So we want to remove that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to target my asterisk or my all selector, and I'm going to set the margin to 0. And once I save that, then you'll notice that everything is now going to be pushed inwards. But then of course it is not pushed inwards because I have not linked my style sheet on top. So let's go ahead and link our style sheet in the head. So link style sheet is coming from index.css like so. And then now everything is going to be pushed inwards, and let me place this to the right like so, and then place this to the left. Now I do want to mention something, that I'm only doing this on this particular index.css, but for future projects, because I don't want to keep on repeating this, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a global CSS file which we're going to be referencing in every project, because we're going to be doing this in every single project. So I don't want to keep on writing it out over and over again. And that is where the concept of modularity in programming comes in. So we're going to reset the margin, we're going to reset the padding, and then we're also going to reset the box sizing, set this to border box. And you can see that now that we have reset that, then our bullets, let me remove this so that I can show you. List items have some default padding on the left, so that's why it's important to add this. But before I do that, then I just want to show you how to remove this bulleted list from here. And you can do that by targeting the unordered list that we have, and the unordered list we have is right here. And I'm just going to target it and say list style type and set this to none, which is going to make them disappear like so. And then now I can add in our padding, which is going to reset everything properly. So now the first thing that I want to do is I want to go inside the body, and I want to give a body a default font family. So the font family for the body, I'm going to call this Georgia like so. And then I'm going to give it a font size of 16 pixels, which is going to be our root EM. Remember root EM. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and before I save that, actually let me give this a background color. And the background color, let me just get it from Figma. So the background color is going to have this hex value, and this hex value looks a bit weird, but that is because we have added opacity at the end of it. So you can add opacity in VS Code by just hovering over this and then dragging this slider down. So when you drag this slider down, you're increasing or decreasing the opacity. So let me save this, and we should have this on the screen. Now we can see our icons because they are white in color. So once again, just to demonstrate, if I reduce the opacity and save this, then you can see that the opacity also reduces. And then now what I want to do is, because on mobile screens, these are going to be stacked one on top of the other, I want to add padding on the body so that they're going to push inwards just a bit. So I'm going to say set a padding of 1.25 rem all around, which is going to push this inwards. And then I'm going to go ahead and target the class of container. And the class of container is what we have as the main div inside here, which covers everything all the way to the bottom article right here. So for the div, the class of container, I'm going to give this a background color of this very same color, but I'm going to remove the opacity from it, so it's going to be darker, okay, because it doesn't have any opacity. And then now remember how padding is applied to the inside of elements, so I want to add padding on this container so that these elements push inwards. So I'm going to say add a padding of 1.25 rem all around like so. You can see that now the items move inwards. And then if you look at the design, which is this right here, then it has a slight curvature on every corner, right? So on the bottom right, on the bottom left, it has a slight curvature. So in order to do that in CSS, then we use a property that is called border radius. So you can do that by adding border radius here, and I use a border radius of 10 pixels, which is 0.625 rem. So once I save that, you'll see that now the borders on the container are rounded just a bit. And then the next thing that I want to do is I want to add this neon looking color on the bottom. So in order to do that, this is very easy. We use a property in CSS called box shadow. So let's go ahead and do that. I can say box shadow, and box shadow takes in properties in the following ways. So box shadow takes in properties in the form of the vertical offset, so the vertical offset, and then the horizontal offset, so horizontal offset, and then the blur radius, and then the spread radius, and then the color that you want the border radius, the box shadow to be. So for example, if I want the vertical offset to be 10 pixels, I can say 0.625 rem, and then the horizontal, and don't put commas by the way, and then the horizontal offset, if I want it to be 10 pixels as well, I can say 0.625 rem, and then the blur radius, if I want it to be 10 pixels, I can say 0.625 rem. And I do realize that I'm using the same units, but this is just to show you how these are interpreted. And then the spread radius, I'm going to set it to 0.625 rem as well. And then for the color, for example, you can set it to red. Now when I save this, look at what is going to happen. So this is what is going to happen. So on the vertical, so it is vertical by 10 pixels, and then horizontally, so on the x-axis by 10 pixels, and then it also has a blur radius. Let me just increase this. That's why this is just a bit blurry, and then it has a spread radius as well. Now I don't want this to be 10 pixels because it is too big, so let me reduce this to about 0.3 rem. Let me see how this looks. That is much better. And then I also don't want this color to be red, and I also want it to be slightly opaque, right? So to reduce the opacity. So in order to do that, we have used hexadecimal values here and here as well, but I want to use another way you can add colors in CSS, which is by using the red, green, blue, and alpha value. And you can do that by just saying RGBA, so red, green, blue, and alpha, as you can see right here. So I want to say 0 on the red, 0 on the green, 0 on the blue, and then 0.5 on the alpha. So the alpha value is the opacity. So I'm saying that give it a black color, but with an opacity of 0.5. So when I save this, then this is going to happen. And you can see that it is almost looking close to the design, but then the design is a slightly below neon. So let me just get the RGBA values for that, and then I can just paste them in. So here we have an RGBA value. So it has 60 on the red, 236 on the green, 215 on the blue, and 0.25 on the alpha value of the opacity. And I should mention that when you're using RGB, the values go from 0 to 255. So 255 is the maximum value. So when you have 255 here, 255 here, 255 here, then you're going to have a white color, I believe. And then when you have 000, then you're going to have a black color. And then everything in between, you can just play around with the values. Or if you're using VS Code, then you can just hover over the color, and then you can select what kind of color that you want. And then you can also drag this slider as you want. So you're going to have that. Let me save this. And would you look at that? We now have this. And you know what? Let me change this to 0.45 just to make it more prominent, or 0.5. And then now let's begin styling out our items. So I'm going to go inside the container, and inside this container, now look at this. So inside the container, we have an article, and we have this image, and we have this div, and we also have the second article, and we have the third article. So I only want to access the first article. Now I can do that easily by giving this article a class of something like first, right? But because I want us to do practice, I am not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside my CSS, and I'm going to say access the article, which is the first child. So we are using pseudo selectors once again. And then when the article is the first child, then I want to say display the items inside here as a flex box. And what display flex is going to do is it's going to check for the first item inside this article. So the first item is the image, and then it's going to check for the second item, which is the div. Remember, not the h2 or the small, the div is the second item, because the div is the direct child of this article. So it's going to check for the image and the div and then display them side by side as children. So when I save this, then you can see that now the text goes here and the front-end web developer is here. And then now what I want to do is I want to change this text color to white so that it's actually visible. Now I can do that for every single article, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go inside the container and I'm just going to set the overall color to white. And what is going to happen is that every other child inside the container is going to take the color of white from the parent. Okay, so now I want this text to move to the center. So I can do that using Flexbox by saying align dash items to the center. Like so, as you can see that now it is now to the center. And then now what I want to do is also add a property here called justify content to the start. So it just makes sure that everything here is going to be aligned to the left as opposed to the center or to the right. I can also do something cheesy here and set this to space between, and you can see that it is going to go end to end. So this is going to be placed to the right and this is going to be placed to the left, and it is more prominent on larger screens, as you can see. So I don't want that to happen, so that's why I have this to justify content to start, so that now even on larger screens, then it is always going to be appended to the left. And now the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to add a bit of margin between this image and the text. So I'm going to copy this and I want to access the div inside here, and the div is the one that contains the text, and I'm going to say set the margin on the left to 1 rem, separate it out like so. And then now I want to reduce the width of this image because it is too big, right? So once again I can just copy this and then I can go above the div because the image comes first, and I can say that for the image inside here, then I want the width of this image to be 1 rem. Let me see how small that is. Too small. Let's say 5 rem. Okay, 5 rem is much more manageable. And then now once you have that, then I want to reduce the opacity of this text just a bit. Okay, so in order to do that, then I'm just going to go inside this div. So copy this, and then I'm going to target this small element inside the div, and then I'm going to say reduce the opacity to 0.75. And notice what happens now. It looks a bit grayed out, but the reason why I'm doing that is because of text hierarchy, such that you put focus on this more than this, and it's also pleasing to the eye. And then the next that I'm going to do is I want to access this second article. So I'm going to do that by saying dot container and article and placing my colon and saying for the nth child 2, which is the second article, like so. Then I'm going to say I want a margin on the top and the bottom of 2 rem or 1.5 rem, and then 0 on the left and right. Now I have done this on purpose because notice how I have used margin left here. It is also possible to say margin top. So let me just comment this out to show you. I can say margin top, set this to 1.5 rem, and you notice that margin is going to be applied outside of the article, and it's going to be a margin of 1.5 rem right here. And then I can also say margin bottom of 1.5 rem, and this, as you can see, is going to work correctly. However, it is not recommended to use this if you're going to be using multiple properties which perform the same thing. So these two properties do perform the same thing, and what that means basically is that instead of writing all this down, so for example, if you were to add margin on the right, so like margin right 1.5 rem or margin right 5 rem, for example, and then margin left 2 rem. Now it is possible to reduce this into a single line. So how do you reduce that into a single line? The margin property can be written in the following way. So the first value in the margin property is the top value, and then the second value is the right, and then the third value is the bottom, and the fourth value is the left. So if I have a margin of 1.5 rem and then 1.5 rem and then 5 rem and then 2 rem, what this means is that I want a margin of 1.5 rem on the top, 1.5 rem on the right, 5 rem on the bottom, and 2 rem on the left. So I'm going to remove this. I'm just going to remove this, and then I'm going to save this, and then look how this is applied. So a margin of 5 rem is applied on the top, a margin of 1.5 rem is applied on the right. Sorry, a margin of 1.5 rem is applied on the top, and then a margin of 5 rem is applied on the bottom, and then a margin of 2 rem is applied on the left. So it's very possible to reduce this into a single line if you want to, and you can do the same for padding, by the way. So padding is also applied in the very same way. So now what I'm going to do is, I don't want this margin to be here. Instead, I'm going to reduce it into 1.5 rem on the top and bottom, and 0 on the left and right. And remember, if you have these two values, then this first value is going to be the value on the top and bottom, and then the second value is going to be the value on the left and the right. So that's how the margin is interpreted. So I'm going to save this, and notice this. So we no longer have margin on the left or the right, but we do have margin on the top and the bottom. And remember that the reason why these are pushed inwards is because on the container we have a padding of 1.25 rem. So if I disable this, then it's going to be pushed to the end, which is a very bad UI. So once we have this, then I can see this text is a bit too close to one another, right? Like the line height is too small. So I want to increase the line height. So I'm just going to copy this down here, and I'm going to target the paragraph, and I'm going to say increase the line height to 1.8, which is just going to increase the line height, as you can see. And then now let's go inside this final article. So for the dot container class and the article, which is the last child, then I want to access the h3 inside here. And for the h3, I want to have a margin bottom of 1 rem. And I know now you're wondering, why am I using this when I said that this is a much better way to do it? It's because I'm only adding one rule here, which I'm never ever going to change again. And so I can use this, or I can use this one liner. You know, they are both one liners technically, so it doesn't really matter all that much. And something else that I've just remembered to mention is that this is another HTML rule, okay? So in HTML, an h3 should never appear before an h2 appears. Does that make sense? The same way, an h2 should never appear before an h1 appears. And you know what? That is a rule that I've not stuck to here. So let me change this into an h1, and then I'm going to change this into an h2. So that is a rule. That is a rule in HTML that always make sure that if you want to use an h2, always make sure that an h1 has appeared before it. And if you want to use an h3, always make sure that there is an h2 above it somewhere. And if you want to use an h4, and so on and so forth, always make sure that the previous headings are before them. So I'm going to change this into h2 because it is now an h2. Okay, and then let's go ahead into the unordered list. So I'm going to copy this, and I want to access the unordered list inside here. And then for this unordered list, we're going to use flexbox once again. If I say display flex, the default behavior is to place them in a row form, as you can see right here. And then what I want to do now is say align dash items to the center, so that they're going to be aligned on the horizontal axis. And then I'm going to say justify content to start, which is going to align them on the vertical axis. Now, something very interesting, I can set this to space between, and it is going to space these items out to take up all of this remaining space. So if I save this, then look at this. Okay. Now, I don't like doing that because, as you can see, it is always going to do this. Now, it is very possible to limit this container so that we can have this like not misbehave in the following way, or I can just change this to space around, and look at what happens. Now the space is going to be pushed inwards just a bit, but it's still going to take up the full space. Or once again, I can change it into space evenly, and they're going to be evenly spaced out by just pushing them inwards even more. Now these are not solutions that I really like, because on mobile screens, and let me just show you how it's going to look on extremely small mobile screens. So right around Samsung Galaxy here, this is how it's going to look, right? Now on mobile screens, I want this to always be to the left because we have started by displaying this to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to justify content to the start, and then I'm going to go inside this UL and target the list items, and then I'm going to set a margin on the list item, so margin right of 0.5 rem, which is going to separate them out just a bit, or you know what, let me just say 1 rem. And then now what I want to do is, what I want to show you is that, let me change this into responsive and make it even smaller. Now look at this. When you get to extremely small devices, which technically I don't know if any of them exist, I do know of the Galaxy Fold, so we can use that as a case study. You can see that for the Galaxy Fold that this technically overflows, right? We don't want that to happen. So I'm going to place a rule that when we reach to the end of this container, then I want this last item or any other items that are overflowing to automatically go into the next line. So we can do that easily by going right below this and adding another property here called flex wrap and setting this to wrap. And look at this now, because we have reached the end of the container, then it automatically goes into the next line. And if I set this to responsive, look at this now. So when we reach the end of the container, then they automatically go into the next line. As you can see, fantastic. Okay, and we can do the same for these two items because these are also flexbox. This is also a flexbox. So let's go ahead and find where we have display flex right here, and we can just say flex wrap, set this to wrap. Okay, and we're going to have this. Would you look at that? Okay, fantastic. Now let's go ahead and let's do something else here. Now what I want to do is I want this container to move to the center, and I'm going to show you 3 ways where you can do that. And the first way is going to be by using flexbox, and then the second way is going to be by using CSS grid, and then the third way is going to be by using absolute positioning. So right inside the body, because I want to use flexbox first, I'm going to say display flex, and nothing here is going to change because remember, flex places items in raw form by default, but you can change that using a property called flex direction. So flex direction, and if I set this into column, then the default behavior is going to change from a row to a column form, and we're going to encounter this in similar projects or in future projects. So what I wanted to show you is that if I go into the body, because the body is what we are accessing here, and the body is the main element, so the body only has one div with a class of container. So if I add another div here and add a paragraph that says Lauren 5, then notice that this paragraph is going to be placed to the right. But if I go into the body and I set a flex direction of column, then the paragraph is going to go to the bottom. So let me save this and look at this, it's right here. So remember that the default behavior of flexbox is to place items in raw form. Now I can remove this. And then now what I want to do is I'm going to say align items, align dash items center, which is going to align everything in horizontal form. And then I'm going to say justify content, justify content. I can't type. Oh my God. So justify content to the center, which is going to align them vertically. And then now, in order to move the body, in order to move this container, sorry, to the center, then we need to have a fixed height. So you can add a fixed height here of, let's say, 100 viewport heights. But remember what I explained, that for mobile screens, viewport heights aren't really supported all that well. So I'm going to say calculate 100 viewport heights minus 0.1 pixels, so that the units that are returned here are going to be pixels. And we're not going to have the downsides of having viewport heights on mobile, which provides a shaky feeling on mobile. So I'm going to save this, and now notice that it is now moved to the center. Now you can have a height here, or you can have it as mean height. It's going to work the very same way. Now this is by using flexbox to center everything. So let me comment this out, and I'm going to save this, and it's going to go back to the top. And next we're going to use, say, display grid. So display this as a grid, and display grid, needs to have another property in order for it to work, but we're not going to be using that property here, so I'm not going to talk about it. But in future projects, we're going to talk about grid more in depth. So I'm going to say display grid, and then I'm going to say place items to the center. And then here as well, we're going to have a mean height of, once again, calculate 100 viewport heights minus 0.1 pixels. And now look at this. Now it is placed to the center. Okay, so you can use flexbox or you can use grid. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out. And now the third way that you can center this container is by using absolute positioning. So I'm going to save this, and it's going to go back to the top. And now I'm not going to be on the body, but I'm going to go inside the container. So inside the container, I'm going to set the container to be positioned absolute. And how this works is that the container is going to be positioned absolute. So the container here is going to be positioned absolute within the body. It's going to be positioned absolute within the body, and we know that the body is the entire window inside here. So let's go ahead and let's figure it out how we are going to position absolute to the body. So when you position items, you get access to other properties such as the top, the left, the bottom, and the right. So I'm going to say position it to the top by 50%, and I'm going to save this, and you'll notice that it's going to move 50% to from the top. And yes, indeed, this is 50% because it starts counting from here up to here, this being 50%, and then the remaining one from here to the bottom is the remaining 50%. So this is correct. And then here I'm going to say I want to push this to the left by 50% as well, because 50% is a half of 100. So I'm going to say left by 50%, and you can see that now it is left by 50% right here. And if you are to draw a line, then the line is going to cross right around here. Okay, so it is placed technically to the second quadrant, but we don't want it to be here. We want it to move to the perfect center. So we need to reset this just a bit by adding another property here and saying transform, and we're going to say translate, and we're going to say translate on the x-axis by minus 50%, and placing a comma and saying translate on the y-axis by minus 50%. Okay, so that's what this does. And when I save this, now look at this, it is perfectly positioned to the center, so that now even on mobile screens it's going to be positioned to the center. But you can see the downside of using absolute positioning. So let's go ahead and fix that by going into the container and giving the container a minimum width of, let's say, 300 pixels. And then when I save that, then you'll notice that the container is going to always have a minimum width of 300 pixels. Okay, so now that the container has a min width of 300 pixels, then notice how when you try to increase this a bit, when it's still going to increase, but I want that when we reach a certain width, then the container is no longer going to increase. So I'm going to do that by adding a media query, where I'm going to just say, let me go to the bottom of this because I like adding media queries on the bottom. And I'm going to say the at media rule, which we have seen before. And I'm going to say that for a min width of 500 pixels, meaning when the device width is greater than 500 pixels, then I want to target the container class, and I want this to have a width of 500 pixels. So I'm going to save this, and then now look what happens. Now even if I increase it, then the width of the container is never going to increase, except for when I am less than 500 pixels. So right around here. Okay, and you can see that this is going to be a problem, so let me change this to 480. Okay, so that now it's going to have some bit of spacing on the left and right. Now something else that I'm going to mention is that if you don't want to add this media query, you can just comment this out, and then you can go to the top where you had your absolute positioning, and you can comment this out, and then you can use either grid or flexbox. In this case I prefer to use flexbox, and you can see that flexbox doesn't really mess everything up. It just adds this to the center properly, and it adds the padding as well. But then now what I'm going to do is right on the container, I'm going to give the container a max width, and I'm going to give it a max width of 500 pixels. And what this means basically is that once the container reaches a max width of 500 pixels, it is no longer going to increase. So I'm going to save this and look at this now. Now when it reaches 500 pixels, it no longer increases, and we don't have to add the extra media query on the bottom. So it's basically you choose your poison if you want to use display flex or grid, or you want to use absolute positioning. But you can see that the downside of using absolute positioning is that you have to add this inside, and then you also have to add a media query to make it responsive, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the first project down, and it looks quite elegant. And remember, I did mention that we only want to do this once, so this type of resetting, so the UL, the asterisk and everything, I only want to do it once. So what I'm going to do is inside this index.css file, I'm going to go inside here, and this is the file where we built our header and our navbar. I'm just going to comment all of this out because we're going to be rebuilding it. And then now what I want to do is I want to add some global styles inside here. So what I'm going to do is inside here, I want to say that for all the images, I want the images to have a max width of 100%. And then I want the width of the images to always be 100%. And then I'm going to go through each of these lines of code in other projects. Okay, so don't worry about it. And then I want the body to have a font family, which we're going to import now because we don't have it, and the font family is called Inter. And then it's going to have a fallback of sans serif, and we're going to get this from fonts.google.com. And then the default font size for the body is going to be 16 pixels, which is going to be our root em value. And I can remove it from here as well. So I'm going to save this. And then once I save this, then I need to import this font. So let me show you how you can import fonts into your project. So if you open up fonts.google.com, then I can search for the font called Inter. If I can find it, where is it? What? What? The font? Okay, here it is. Oh, I wasn't seeing it. So the font is called Inter. And then now I want to use the regular 400. So for most of these projects, we're going to be using the regular 400 and the bold 700. And I'm just going to click on the import. So there are two ways that you can link your fonts, by the way. I should mention this. The first way is by using this link tag. So you can just copy this link tag and going into your index.html file and linking it. So just the way we were linking the style sheet, you can just paste it inside here. And then you have to specify that you want a font size of Inter, which we are importing here, and it's going to apply in your project. And just to show you a demonstration, if I wanted to apply to this project, then I'm going to go inside this index.css file for our project, and then I'm going to change this into the Inter font. So I can change this into Inter with a fallback of sans serif, and you'll notice that now the font changes into the Inter font. That is one way that you can do it. You can link it inside the head of your HTML, but I don't like doing it like this. I like linking it in my CSS file so that I just keep everything structured out. So if I go inside the CSS file inside here, I can just copy the import rule. So the import rule, we are meeting with another rule in CSS called the import, and I can just paste it on top, and it just says import this font from this URL, and it's called the Inter font with a weight of 400 and 700. And then when I save this, then it's not going to apply on this particular project because this now is a fallback of sans serif, because we set this to have a fallback of sans serif because it doesn't know where this font is coming from. Now if I go inside here and I want to target this CSS file, then let me show you how you're going to do it. I can add a link here with a rel of style sheet with an href here that says go to dot slash or dot slash. So go outside by one folder and go into the index.css file in that folder, and then I can save this. And then notice that now we're going to be using the Inter font. And then now that we are importing this, remember that we are resetting some styles here. Then I can go into my actual CSS file, which is this one inside my project. And even if I remove this now, nothing is going to break on our website because we are linking our style sheet, which is going to be our global style sheet. That's the reason why I wanted to have this into a separate file, because we are going to be reusing these styles in all the projects. Okay, so rather than having to repeat this all every single time, then I just want to have them into a separate CSS file, and then I can just link the CSS file in the head of my HTML, and then we're going to have this. So that is going to be the first file, the first project complete. And then now I just want to show you how we can commit this project to GitHub. And remember, our GitHub repository is going to be this one. It's going to be linked in the description. So now I'm going to open up my terminal using Control and J. And then inside here, I want to cd into this folder. But let me begin by adding this index.css file. So I'm just going to say git add index.css. And I'm going to say git commit -m, and I'm going to say add global styles. So git commit -m is the commit message that you want to appear. And you can see that the message is going to be add global styles. And then I'm going to go inside, and then I'm just going to say git add everything else. So git add all. So git add dot is git add everything else that is remaining. And then I'm going to say git commit, and I'm going to say project 1 initial commit. And then I'm just going to say enter, and then I'm going to say git push, which is going to push it to my remote repository on GitHub. So once this pushes, then if I reload my repository, then I should see the changes. So reload, and we're going to say that I committed this one 15 seconds ago, and this other one I committed it 42 seconds ago. Now I am going to add a readme just so that it is going to be easier to navigate this repository and so on and so forth. And then I'm also going to export these images so that you're going to have access to the design as well.